wanted to ask you was yoga and Hinduism, right? Many people, especially neo yoga practitioners, tend to kind of divorce Hinduism from the practice of yoga itself. They think of yoga as a system, and you could say they kind of secularize it, as a practice rather than a part of Hinduism. And sometimes even a few Hindus might say, is it the same thing? Is it interlinked? Are they two different things? Are they connected? So how do you, like, I want you to weigh in on what do you think of yoga? Do you think it's an integral part of Hinduism, or do you think it can also be seen outside the religious context?
Well, yoga per se is, as I said, one of our six darshanas, right? When I say our, what do I mean by ours? It's one of the six darshanas of the Sanatan philosophy. Nobody recognizes it. This whole thing about this reality, the Brahman, is a Hindu concept. How can we run away from it at all? Nobody, no other religion says we have it in us to achieve divinity, right? They all completely say for them there is a different God, and humans can never reach there. It is blasphemous to even say that you can achieve divinity. That concept comes from us. Yoga is actually saying, how do you actually get to that realization? That realization of oneness with the Param Tattva, right? This entire concept is in Hindu. Nobody else even allows for it. So how can we ever say that yoga is not Hindu or yoga, and how can we separate the two? We absolutely can't. In fact, for whatever people say ki acha yoga has nothing to do with Hinduism, blah blah blah, they try to secularize it. You see, in the West, there are so many movements which actually are saying that yoga is Hindu and it is a dark practice. So they say that it makes you less Christian if you start doing yoga. So if you read up, there are so many of these very conservative states, red states in US, which actually ban yoga. They don't want to even teach their kids yoga because apparently they think it takes them away from Christianity, right? Because the whole thing where we can ourselves realize the truth within us or through our effort is not recognized in any other religion, any other Abrahamic religion, so to say, at least. Yeah. So in that sense, it is very, very Hindu. Now people may say, oh, but asanas or pranayam, the practice itself is not Hindu. Well, of course, right? Singing choir is not Christian in that sense. Singing is not, but when you say singing a choir, it is still related to the church. So you can't separate it out and say, oh, not related to Christianity. Now somebody might sing a Bollywood song, so what? In a choir, right? But if it is a choir, it is still Christian. So in that sense, yes, doing asan per se, anybody can do it. Yes, it doesn't have to be a Hindu to practice yoga. Fair enough. Yeah. The person practicing may not believe completely in the tenets of Hindu Dharma. Fair enough. But to say yoga has nothing to do with Hinduism is completely baseless. Yoga came into being because of the Sanatan philosophy. Yoga is a darshan for the Sanatan dharma, right? So there is no way to separate the two.
And there's another thing, like you mentioned, some states don't allow the practice of yoga, and then there are other examples where you have things like Christian yoga, where it's kind of
Yeah.
taking yoga in a different context altogether and merging with it. Like that is also like it's a two-sided thing, and even many people here also, I think they want more people to embrace yoga, and they
Correct.
somehow feel that to funnel people in, you will have to de-link yoga
Correct.
and Hinduism because that
Correct.
might put people off. I somehow feel that's where it kind of comes from.
That's that's the whole thing,
Uh,
right? But
I want,
that is what people say. People think कि अगर इसको हिंदू बोलेंगे तो those who are not Hindu will not embrace it. My point is fair enough. Anyways, the tenet from which yoga arises is not something their religions approve. Then why are we force feeding others to accept it, right? If they want to with an open mind, nobody's stopping them. Nobody's saying you are a Christian, you can't do yoga. That's not what we are saying. We are saying you do yoga, but don't say that it has nothing to do with Hinduism. It has everything to do with Hinduism, but we are open enough to say that anybody can practice it, even if you're a non-believer. So we need to get credit for that,
Correct.
rather than us washing our hands off the whole dharma or the basis from which it is coming.
Like you mentioned about yoga can really help with regards to depression and even stress relief. How does yoga really help in that? Like if someone is in a
Hmm.
depression or under a
Hmm.
lot of stress, is there any specific type of yoga or something that they can do specifically that is targeted to this kind of a situation?
Oh, absolutely. So there is this whole field called as yoga therapy, in which looking at the person who needs help, they would structure the entire practice, which will be a mix of asanas and pranayam. It usually starts with pranayam. I think pranayam is the most effective when it comes to any kind of emotional mental imbalances, right? But let us at least understand what stress is. Then we will see why yoga works and why it works better than most other things, right? So, what is stress? Our body has this autonomic nervous system, okay, which has two parts, which is the sympathetic nervous system and we have the parasympathetic nervous system. What happens in the sympathetic nervous system? Basically, it is called the fight and flight system. So these systems, when I say systems, they are all interconnected. They are interconnected to all our physiological systems. So our heart, our respiratory, the entire respiratory system, our metabolic system, digestive, वगैरह वगैरह, all these organs are sort of connected, yeah, through the brain, rather from the brain, so that the right kind of signals and messages that exchange happens between them. That is what the nervous system's work is. This nervous system has two parts, which is sympathetic and parasympathetic. Now, what happens in the sympathetic? So, what does the sympathetic nervous system do, which is called the flight and fight system? Say there is a tiger standing in front of us. Okay. Now, when I see the tiger, I should immediately recognize a threat, right? I should immediately recognize a threat and I should run from that place. Now, if I want to run from that place, what will happen? Basically, when I sense threat, my sympathetic nervous system takes charge of my body. And what happens is, if I need to run, which means I need more blood supply in my limbs, in my legs and my hands. Okay. I need more oxygen. I need more oxygen so that I can breathe and run faster. Yeah. So what it will do is it will dilate the windpipes and stuff in my body. It will dilate arteries which are going to all those parts of my body which are going to be used in this activity of running. Okay. Now blood तो जितना है उतना ही है ना. So if my hands and legs get more blood, it will have to be taken from somewhere else. If the blood has to be channelized in that direction. So what happens is, at a regular, I mean, throughout the day, even if we don't know, there is some digestive process going on in our body. There is some the immune system is working, even though we don't understand. वो काम तो चलते रहता है in our body, right? Which detoxifies us, which does our energy systems, our metabolic system, वो सब चलते रहता है. But when we see a threat and our limbs require more energy, the energy goes is basically channelized through those parts, which means the arteries going to the digestive system will become smaller. Arteries going to the limbs will become larger. Okay, so that I can run until that time the metabolic activity takes a backseat. Now, in a regular course, this is great if there is a real threat. ठीक है, पर आप ये सोचो, अगर बात बात पे मुझे थ्रेट फील हो रहा है, कुछ भी हो गया, things don't happen because the way I wanted and I feel threat. And what happens? Immediately I start behaving, going fiddling and becoming very angry and all of that. Which basically then my body, what message I'm giving my body, that जो metabolic activity होना है या और जो autonomic activities चल रहा है वो सब बंद करो. वहां पे the blood is not going only. The blood is not going to my thinking part of the brain, which is the cortex. So in the brain we have cortex, limbic system, and the cerebellum, which takes care of our movements and all of that. So this autonomic, our nervous system, sympathetic nervous system, is basically controlled from the limbic system, which is the emotional brain. Okay, now this emotional brain, every time it sees a threat, it kicks the sympathetic nervous system को चालू कर देगा. It will kickstart the sympathetic nervous system. Yeah. Now, if this is an ongoing thing, then clearly it will start impacting my system. My metabolism will go for a toss. My immunity will go for a toss, right? My emotions, the controlling of my emotions will go for a toss. That is when I'm in chronic stress. All the time my sympathetic nervous system is functioning. Actually क्या होना चाहिए? My parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and relax system, that should gain prominence. That should be active for a longer period of time, because that is when all my activities that should happen are happening at the right pace, are happening as they should happen. Metabolism चल रहा है, immunity process जो भी चल रहा है वो चल रहा है, सोचना, thinking, analysis वो सब अच्छे से हो रहा है, right? Now, when does that happen? When I am mentally feeling safe and secure. Yeah. So now, how do I feel mentally safe and secure? If I am in that environment, or I have controlled my emotional system to recognize threat only when there is threat, not otherwise. Right? अब पर problem तो हो गया है. We are already in stress. तो कैसे करो? I'll tell you a simple example. You know, when we are stressed, we'll be breathing very heavily. तो अगर हम किसी के पास जाके बात करेंगे, we'll be very incoherent, and immediately that person will say, शांत रहो, take a break, breathe deep. ठीक है? They'll say breathe deep. So when we breathe deep, we relax, we are able to make more sense of what we are talking, and we'll be able to think properly, right? What has really happened is that we've said sympathetic nervous system को बंद करो, parasympathetic को चालू करो. So when that happens, basically when you started breathing deeply, immediately the message went that there is no threat anymore, time to relax. ठीक है? Which means by breathing, I can actually control which nervous system comes into play. There is a sutra which says, chale vate chale chittam, nischale nischchalam bhave. Your mind and your breathing is very closely connected. By controlling your breath, we can control our mind. Now, what is controlling the breath? That is the pranayam that we do. Okay. So the practice of yoga basically is basically strengthening the limbic system. One, to not feel threat again and again regularly, so that you are not in the stress mode. And it is actually bringing parasympathetic nervous system to play for a longer period of time. I know it's a little confusing, but very simply, this is what happens. Ki with your breath, you can control this nervous system, like what is happening within your body. One. Second, even when you do asana, right? So the thing is, our limbic system has the pleasure and pain points. कुछ देखा तो अच्छा लगा तो I am very happy. नहीं अच्छा लगा, I see that as threat and I become very angry. Okay. Now, ideally, my decisions should not, my actions and reactions should not be based on likes and dislikes. I need to be thinking. सोच समझ के I need to take a decision. That सोचना समझना happens in the thinking brain, which is the cortex. Okay. But this cortex takes time. उसके पहले ये जो limbic system है, because it controls my autonomic nervous system, comes into play, makes me take these impulsive reactions, which I later regret. Okay. But when I'm doing everything at a slower pace, when I'm doing asana, what I'm doing in asana, I'm not running. I'm trying to hold a position for a few seconds, right? Now, when I'm trying to balance, I need to bring my cortex into play. It will only happen through awareness of that position. मेरे दिमाग में 10 चीजें चल रही होगी, I will not be able to balance. Okay, so I need to stop that, bring awareness into doing that position. When I say bring awareness, on its own, the cortex comes to play and it takes control of the cerebellum. Similarly, when I am doing pranayam, I am taking control of my emotional brain. The cortex का exercise होता है to start taking control of all these processes that are going on, which help me decide, which help me manage my stress. So this is the overall concept. Now, of course, if we can get into the details of कौन से आसन से क्या होता है, कौन से प्राणायाम से क्या होता है, but it's basically this, where your cortex and your limbic system start becoming stronger, and they don't fire at every given point. They don't fire at अच्छा लगा बुरा लगा. That is what is samatvam. Again, जो हम कह रहे हैं ना कि be अच्छा लगा बुरा लगा, no duality of heat and cold, liking disliking, failure success. No, try to be calm in all those situations. Basically, when things don't go your way, don't see it as a threat. Develop a larger perspective in life. This is what it is, and this is what yoga helps you develop. Even if that's not what you want, even if you keep practicing, say, asana and pranayam, your goal might be different, but that is what happens because that is the impact it has on your system. इसलिए मुझे लगता है कि people sometimes make a big deal कि larger goal they छोड़ दिया है, छोटा ही करते हैं, चलेगा, but वो छोटा का भी impact बहुत ज्यादा है. So it is great even if somebody does only asana and pranayam.
I think somewhere you also kind of explained how this discipline also has a philosophy. It's just that it's not visible in that same way. It works in a very different way from, that's quite interesting. But you mentioned about the physical impact. I wanted to understand a little bit of the psycho-spiritual impact, in the sense, what impact does yoga have on the inner world, the mind, the soul, the subconscious, I want to understand that part of it.
So there are studies which say that when you start getting deeper into meditation, there are certain kind of alpha waves which are generated in your mind, which allow you to have some of these experiences, that out of body experiences, if I may, which allow you to look beyond the present reality, or what you seek is the present reality. But that is one part of it. I think the other is not so, it doesn't have to be so mystic. Let's take it very simply. If you get into a state of equanimity, what really happens? When you are thinking properly, thinking clearly, you are able to take better decisions. Okay, why take better decisions? Because as you said, you are in strategy. In strategy, many times strategy में तो especially consultants को बुलाते हैं, या वो लोग consulting का काम भी करते हैं. What do consultants do? They come in and they give a very unbiased perspective. Why do they give unbiased perspective? Because they are not the involved party, right? Hence, they are able to take a larger view, which the people involved are not able to do, because their lens is colored. They have their biases which are stopping them from seeing the truth for what it is, right? The same thing I said for yoga. Now, if I can develop my brain itself in a way where I can pull myself out of my current biases and look at everything around me as a sakshi in a very objective way, then already the first step of broadening my vision is happening, because I can see the things around me in a much broader perspective. Then that I would have if I was not equanimous, if I didn't have that samatva, right? Because I would have been the involved party. So what yoga helps us do is also become more and more and more objective. That is what yoga anushthan, which Patanjali says, it helps us develop vivek buddhi. Vivek buddhi का अर्थ क्या सही है, क्या गलत, what is true, what is not, what matters, what not. If my vivek buddhi develops, I will by itself make better decisions. Okay, that is one part. That itself will in a way help me to be happier in life. Because at the end of the day, we say मनः एव मनुष्याणां कारणम बंध मोक्षणम. ये जो मन है ना, इसी से हमारा बंधन और इसी से हमारा मोक्ष है. सो इफ आई अचीव control over my brain and my sense organs, itself I have reached a stage where I am genuinely in a state of happiness, where whatever is going around me is not troubling me anymore. ठीक है. We think of psycho spiritual state as something, पता नहीं क्या होगा. I feel this itself is the first level of achieving that sense of happiness, because even in that psycho spiritual state, what do we say? Ananda is the thing, right? We talk about Satchidananda to achieve that state of Satchidananda. That Satchidananda starts with Ananda, right? So even if the realization of oneness hasn't happened, we are generally in a state where we are happier in life, not troubled by things going around us. That is already the first step. Now, as we do more dhyan dharana, it is said, I haven't experienced it, so I can't say कि अच्छा मेरा हो गया. I haven't achieved that siddhi, so I'm not claiming कि मेरा है. But what I've heard, what I've studied, they say that typically the brain that we use, right, the amount of brain that is used, that's only 15 to 20% of our actual capacity. And we are not able to access the other capacity of our brain because we are so hung up in the inputs that come through our jnanendriya, the sense organs that we have. Touch, sight, smell, all of that. We are so full, so obsessed with that and so full of that. Because jo aa raha hai, we are always, our senses are always active. And there are always inputs coming from that. So because of that, only that part of our brain which processes these inputs, we are able to access. And the other part of the brain, we are not able to access. So if we stop this activity of inputs that are coming from our senses, that is what pratyahara does. No? Pratyahara says, move inside from all these inputs that you're getting from the external inputs that you're getting through your senses. Keep them away. You move inside, turn inwards and focus. Now, when you start moving out of these inputs, there is more space and energy even in your brain to seek inputs coming from other means. Okay. Now, what does that mean? We call Vedas as Shruti. Right? Why? Because we say that nobody wrote it, nobody composed it. It came to people. What does it mean it came to people? They saw it. हम बोलते हैं उन्होंने देखा, उन्होंने सुना. कहां से सुना? Knowledge was there, right? Knowledge was there. They could access that knowledge. If you see a lot of scientists also, sometimes the way the knowledge comes to them is not through the typical means. They are so engrossed and so focused on that one thing that beyond the sensory organs, they can seek knowledge through other means. They can seek knowledge through intuition. So this developing of intuition is also very, very key that yoga helps you to do. That is why it says, Ritambara Tatra Prajna. It develops your intuition where you can access wisdom which is not easily available to others who are only focused on getting inputs through the sense organs. That is what yoga says. Yeah, and intuition strong develop hota hai, ye to hai hi, because again it's the same thing, right? When you start becoming more unbiased, your intuition also develops, your vivek buddhi also develops, your discriminatory faculty. So it's basically allowing the use of the larger capacity of your brain that is there beyond just the inputs that are coming from your senses. Yeah, so this is how I can explain it, so to say. People have had out-of-body experiences. People have achieved siddhi. So there is the third chapter in Patanjali Yoga Sutra. It's about Vibhuti Pada, where it actually talks about what kind of siddhi people get. Like how through certain practices, people can foresee the future. Or people can, float over land. Or they can control somebody else's mind. Yeah, all these siddhis people can achieve through practice. That is the claim made, and we do know that there are yogis and yogis who have achieved that kind of siddhis. Yeah. However, I usually don't want to or don't like to talk about some of those because ek to it is not accessible to everybody, how much ever we practice. ठीक है, that will be maybe 0.01% or 2% of the people who actually can achieve that kind of siddhi in today's life, in today's world. The other is, if the goal becomes achieving that siddhi, the purpose of yoga is
defeats the purpose
already. Yeah, because siddhi jab aane lagti hai na, to again the ahankar starts developing, something that you're trying to run away from. The bias starts developing that you're trying to run away from, rather you're trying to take away and achieve that sense of equanimity, which will go away, which comes with the siddhis if one is not careful. So siddhis come, but even those siddhis one has to not be attached to. That is what even Patanjali says, that siddhis will come because you do those practice very, very intensely. Yeah, it is not कि अच्छा रोज 1 घंटा आसन कर लिया, वैसा नहीं. It requires a very deep study with a lot of effort, putting in lots of hours under the guidance of a Siddha Purush or Stri, whatever, yeah, but somebody who has actually achieved that. Only then can one get to that level of psycho-spiritual awareness, understanding and siddhis. Again, संस्कार है तो हो जाएगा,
and
संस्कार है तो हो जाएगा, उसका कुछ नहीं कर सकते.
But one very interesting thing you mentioned, somehow I've also noticed this. People who sometimes get into this practice, they do develop a little bit of a spiritual ego.
Yes.
I'm not saying those who are realized. I'm saying those who are in the process of
Yes.
getting there. I've seen a little bit of a spirit, which if you have ego, the very journey is defeated, right? You literally have fallen to the ground
Absolutely.
because you're spiritual, you can't feel that, oh, mera spiritual experience is better than the other person. Like, how different are you then from a programmer, coder, or a corporate professional? It's just that your path is different.
Have you heard the story of Vishwamitra, the making of Vishwamitra?
Yeah, Vishwamitra and Vashishta?
Yes.
The Menka
Yes.
story?
Menka is one part of the story,
Yeah,
but the
of
entire
course.
thing, how Kaushik, Vishwamitra is a rishi, is a Kshatriya, right? He's a king named Kaushik.
He's a
How he becomes
Kshatriya.
Vishwamitra.
Yeah.
But that path, right? This is exactly what happens. He achieves Siddhi, but again, somewhere either the ego comes in, or he has not yet gained control over his anger, yeah, or he has not yet gained control over his calm.
Yeah.
So all the practice that he had done, the tapa that he's done, goes away, and he has to start again from scratch. Because to achieve that state of samatva or yoga or kaivalya means you are actually free of all of this, all kam, krodha, lobha, moha, mad, matsarya, ahankar, all of this. As long as that is there, the kaivalya will never happen. That's for sure. People might have glimpses.
Okay.
Glimpses to hoga. वो तो थोड़ा practice करके भी
Yeah.
many a times you get that, because the very feeling that you can actually start quietening your mind is quite something. It is quite something, and some of that might lead to certain realizations, certain experiences. But I would say it really doesn't mean much, because it doesn't stay. If it stays, then it means something, right? But for it to stay requires a much, much deeper practice. Maybe actually going to the Himalayas and doing it. Of course, there are yogis even amongst us, and I would say it is not just about doing it through yoga. That approach, that attitude has to translate into everything that we do, every karma that we do, right? That's where then the bhakti yoga, karma yoga, jnana yoga, all of that comes together in some sense. तो अच्छा, आसन तो ऐसा कर लिया, 2 घंटा मेडिटेशन किया, उसके बाद माय डेली लाइफ इज व्हाट इट यूज्ड टू बी. या आफ्टर दैट आई विल स्टिल बी एंग्री कि अरे मेरा चाय ठंडा हो गया, गरम चाय भी नहीं दिया, राइट? दैट डजंट वर्क. It has to translate into everything in life, every decision that I make, every reaction that I give. It has to shift from reaction and it has to become response. And actually, yoga does that, even if one is not thinking about it. Just the practice of asana and pranayama, people will see that change in their approach itself, doing it over an extended period of time.
Okay. So, if let's say someone has an out of body experience or a highly elevated spiritual experience, what should they do? I mean, what should be their next? What is ideally prescribed in the scriptures, or
It says keep
what are
doing.
they supposed to do?
It
That
says
is
keep doing, because once, see, if there are these
just keep doing.
questions, you haven't achieved kaivalya, right? So that is why having a guru is very important, in at least for this path, or at least at this level, because
Huh.
ideally you should have somebody you can discuss these with. Some of it might just be a delusion. ठीक है, हमको लगता है कि मैंने बहुत तीर मार लिया, होता कुछ नहीं है उसमें. So it could just be a delusion in my mind, because I'm trying so hard to get that experience, right? That I might act, that also is like a mithya that is created out of my own desire. Otherwise, it could be
False
true, but
start.
that is why, yeah, exactly. So that is why I need a guru who I can, one, discuss this with, who can keep guiding me where I am going right or wrong on that path. And once that state of kaivalya, or that, Ritambhara prajna is achieved, the person will himself know or herself know what needs to be done. They don't need anybody else to tell them. Because that's what they say,
But
na? That
if
once you
okay,
know, no questions remain.
right, because I have spoken to a few people who are in the spiritual path, so I wanted to ask you this because so one thing is that I've noticed people say this, that sometimes the guru knows that the shishya has kind of reached a certain level, the guru withdraws
Yes.
because the guru now feels that he is not needed anymore. The shishya has to explore the world on his own because he's reached a certain level, right? I've noticed this as a pattern in many of the stories, and both in text and in person I've heard these stories. Okay, and the other thing is, uh, yeah, like when they are in that, like in that practice, in that zone, sometimes when they start, right, the first step, what I've heard is that it's not easy, in the sense that you experience bad things in your regular world. Like when you go into a spiritual path, the first few steps you really face a lot of mishaps, maybe, money issues. Like there is a lot of problem in your regular life. It's almost like a test before you go into
Hmm.
that path. Have you heard these things
I have
ever?
heard, but I would again say it will be different from different people. A lot of it is also based on, the past karmas and past sanskaras, right? So this is all going to be there. Also, given that we still see some of those problems and stuff, which means we haven't achieved that state of samatva yet, right? So to be able to witness what is happening without being judgmental, without getting disturbed, is what is the eventual goal, anyways, right? So all these things will happen. उनका क्या, जो नहीं करते उनको भी आएगा. Just that this becomes more, rather they observe it more, right? Because ऐसा कौन है जिसकी लाइफ में प्रॉब्लम्स नहीं आते हैं? सबकी लाइफ में प्रॉब्लम्स आते हैं. So I don't think there is necessarily a pattern. I have heard this, especially in tantra upasakas and stuff. I have definitely heard that when they start something, there is a test. It's almost like a test that people go through, right? But मैं कह रही हूँ वहां तक भी मत जाओ. Simple meditation में भी ये होता है, and it is not because external factors have changed. It is because we ourselves can't face our own thoughts and ideas that come to fore when we sit shanti se. Yeah, there will be things, ek to there will be memories that come, which will which will disturb us, which we probably hadn't thought of before. Why? Because we've not yet achieved a sense of detachment from those, right? We are still so attached to those. Only things which we are attached to can give us pain. Things we are not attached to will not give us pain. Okay, we'll be very indifferent to that anyways. So those thoughts which we had thought we've forgotten but are still there, and that sense of detachment hasn't happened, or that resolution hasn't happened, they will come up. Things about our own, right? Many times what happens is that we see ourselves in a certain framework, or we define ourselves. हम है कि नहीं है वो अलग बात है. But there is an image we create about ourselves. Now, when we are sitting in that state of, when we are just sitting, not doing much else, things come up and we will like, Arey, how am I capable of thinking like this? अरे मुझे ऐसा कैसा विचार आ गया? But वो आता है, ठीक है? And we want to always avoid those thoughts which just spring up. So that process itself can be very, very stressful, so to say, can be very detoxifying if you look at it from one way, or very scary in the other sense. So that itself is there. बाहर के टेस्ट जो देवता वाले टेस्ट है वो तो जाने दो, बट सपोज अगर वो छोड़ भी दे तो हमारे इंटरनल टू ओवरकम आवर इंटरनल बायसेस इटसेल्फ इज नॉट इजी, बट
Okay.
वी गेट ओवर इट
Got it.
इवेंचुअली. दैट इज द थिंग ना, पीपल से कि जब आप ध्यान में बैठते हो तो एवरीबडी वांट्स टू जस्ट सिंपली डायरेक्टली अचीव कि नो थॉट्स. अरे ऐसा नहीं होता है, ऐसा कभी नहीं होता है, ठीक है? इट रिक्वायर्स रियली सम पुनर्जन्म संस्कारा टू गेट दैट सो सून. वो ऐसा नहीं होता है. थॉट्स विल बी देयर, but can you see those thoughts without getting disturbed, without that having an emotional impact on you? That itself is a great achievement, where you are not judging yourself also, you let the thoughts come and go. फिर धीरे धीरे the number of the frequency of thoughts will come down. We will be able to start focusing on one or two thoughts for a little extended period of time. कल से ध्यान करना शुरू कर दिया, नेक्स्ट महीने में नो थॉट्स, नहीं, दैट डजंट हैपन. नो थॉट्स तो वैसे भी नहीं होता है. इट टेक्स दैट इज अ सिद्धि इन इटसेल्फ, या, बट गेटिंग टू
No thought is the hardest. Yeah.
exactly that is the, then we've achieved kaivalya, no, that is what it is, then we've achieved that.
Yeah.
But even just sitting there
But-
and not judging the thoughts is quite an achievement, and that is a great start.
But and the other thing that I was talking about, the guru pulling back, is that like, should gurus, like when your realization is improving, right? When you're in that path, when you're excelling or growing, right? When the guru withdraws, should that person seek another guru, or are they beyond a certain level you don't need a guru?
I genuinely believe if a person is committed to what he or she wants to do, in any of these sadhana paths, yeah, yoga is a sadhana path, there are other paths which require sadhana, things come, you don't have to go out to seek. If you are committed to doing something and you are practicing, a right guru will come to you. Then if, as you
Wow.
said, right, the guru will see कि अच्छा अब मेरी जरूरत नहीं है, they might themselves send you to some other guru. अरे ये हम योग की बात कर रहे हैं. This also happens in just like recently I met who is an excellent tabla vadak. He's like gotten a lot of awards, national awards and all of that. And he said that he was learning with a guru, and after a certain stage the guru said, I have nothing more to teach you now. You should now go to this other guru who will teach you XYZ. Now this other guru that he went to, इनको लगा कि अच्छा मेरे गुरु ने बोल दिया मतलब मैं बहुत अच्छा हूँ, इसीलिए he's asked me to go, right? I've learned all that I could from this guru. He said for 2 months this new guru that I went to made me do the basic of the basic things, and I was like, अरे ये क्या है? I was getting very frustrated because I thought I'd learned everything and he's making me do the basic. I had achieved a lot more. So I would go back to my previous guru and keep asking and tell him that अरे ये क्या है? You've sent me to him, but he's not teaching me anything new. He keeps telling me to do that very basic thing which people who just start do. And this person was like, no, keep patience and just do what he tells you to do. He has a better sense of what you need. He will be able to understand what you need better. So 2-3 months this went on, and then this guru realized what is the patrata, or rather he was checking the patrata, he was checking the adhikara of this student, and he realized no, he is now set. Whatever I told him he did regularly, he practiced, now I can take him to the next level. And from what I was told is what this person has achieved, no other shishya of the other guru has achieved. But he says even now when I go I learn something from that guru. So art में भी ऐसा होता है ना? Anything that also requires sadhana, right? Art also requires sadhana. If you talk about at least Indic arts, be it music, sangeet hai, nritya hai, all of this, There
Yeah.
also, if you want to progress, it always helps to have a guru. But that's the thing. Sometimes, or rather, beyond a point, rather than fussing too much about, अरे मेरे को गुरु मिला, मेरे को गुरु नहीं मिला. नहीं, you want to do it, you start your practice. Yeah. And if you're genuinely into it, if you're doing it with the right intention, if you're doing it with discipline, things that need to come to you for the next step will come to you. So we don't need to be bothered about कौन आया कौन नहीं, ये नहीं. अपन अपना करते रहे, गुरु को सही समय पे आना होगा, वो भी आ जाएंगे और ही विल टेक अस वहां से, वो भी हमें उठा के लेके जाएंगे. अगर नहीं तैयार है हम या नहीं जरूरत है तो वो नहीं आएंगे. सम अदर डोर विल ओपन फॉर अस. बट व्हाट मैटर्स इज अभ्यास एंड
Okay.
वैराग्य, एज इवन पतंजलि सेज, राइट? देयर इज नो सब्स्टिट्यूट टू अभ्यास. अभ्यासात जायते सिद्धि. Any siddhi one needs to achieve can only happen through very focused practice and disciplined practice. There is no running away from discipline. What yoga also does, it helps us build that discipline. Why? Because, as I said, it helps strengthen our brain, thinking brain, and it helps achieve control of the emotional brain. If this is set,
Okay.
most things in life will fall into place, like making good decisions, being more disciplined, being responsive rather than reactive. और ये तो रोज चाहिए ना. स्पिरिचुअल ग्रोथ वो तो एक चीज है, वो सबके लिए, इट मे नॉट बी एक्सेसिबल टू एवरीबॉडी, बट दिस इज एक्सेसिबल टू एवरीबॉडी.
Okay. Now, the other aspect that I wanted to ask you is how important do you think is and this is again, we are talking about the spiritual path, right? Is being a brahmacharya in the yogic path. Can a married person, can a person, who's not a brahmacharya, will their yogic practice be affected? Number one, that is one. Second, how can someone achieve an elevated yogic experience in a regular life, not in a spiritual journey to the Himalayas? These two things.
Brahmacharya is not necessarily celibacy. Celibacy is one part of it, but it is not necessarily celibacy. Maybe after reaching a certain stage, complete celibacy might be needed, right? Because the virya that we talk about, virya itself has strength. So you need to transform that virya into energy that leads you to that spiritual growth. But brahmacharya by itself does not mean celibacy. Brahmacharya means charya with brahma. So brahma, staying in that state where your focus is on the larger truth. Yeah, your mind is thinking about the larger truth. You are more disciplined in life. So when we say brahmachari, it is not just that he is a celibate person. After beyond a point, yes, but when he's a student, we call him a brahmachari because the expectation is his mind is focused on gaining more knowledge, more wisdom about the truth, the real truth, and he leads a very, very disciplined life. So in that sense, brahmacharya means that as well. Also, a grihasta can still be practicing brahmacharya. How? It is not by not having sex. No, there are prescribed rules as to when one should or could have sex. So if one stays within that limit, so there are like before before periods ka kuch time hoga. Basically, what was the why is intercourse necessary, right? To have kids in the grihastha ashram. The whole purpose, so to say, of intercourse is to have kids, praja. And continuation of praja is most important. In fact, if you see most of our rishis, from Vishwamitra to Vasishtha to everybody, Atri lelo, jo bhi lelo, all of them were grihasthas. Right? They were all grihasthas, they've all had kids. So they were not brahmachari in the typical sense. There are some schools which have only brahmachari. For example, the Gorakshanath tradition, Gorakhnath tradition, they are typically brahmacharis in the sense of celibate brahmacharis as well. They are the complete yogic, hatha yogic tradition, so to say. But the other rishis who are also spiritually evolved were not necessarily brahmacharis in the sense of celibate brahmacharis, but following the rules of when sex can be had, because it should not be for kamana, not for pleasure, but with the purpose of praja utpatti. And there are rules around when that could be had, how many times a month, and all of that. So if a grihastha lives within that and follows that, that is also called brahmacharya.
So the last thing is for youngsters who want to take up yogic practice, 5 to 10 minutes a day if they want to start. What is a regimen that you would prescribe?
I would say it's always good to start with Surya Namaskar because that gets your body supple, and that is also a little fast, so that you prepare your body to start taking up other practices of yoga. So if you only have 10 minutes, I would say do 10 Surya Namaskars. That is always great. It's like a sequence of asanas, right? And it basically exercises entire body of yours. If you have 20 minutes, I would say do 15 minutes of Surya Namaskar and a couple of asanas, maybe just 15 minutes of Surya Namaskar, and do 5 minutes of Kapalbhati. I'm talking about youngsters, कोई और blood pressure का problem ना हो ऐसा. So Kapalbhati is actually an excellent Shuddhi Kriya. It is a breathing exercise. And excellent Shuddhi Kriya. I have a video on that on my channel. People can look it up. But Kapalbhati is basically active exhalation and passive inhalation. So अगर 5-15-20 मिनट है तो 10 से 15 मिनट do the Surya Namaskar आसन practice and do 5 minutes of Kapalbhati. That itself is good. आधा घंटा है तो भी I would say do 5 minutes of Kapalbhati. Anulom Vilom can be like 5 to 8 minutes, and the rest you can do maybe 7, 8, 10 Surya Namaskars and add some more asanas to it. Uske liye to there are lots of videos also online. Start with a basic. Always take the beginners one. ठीक है, beginners वाला करोगे तो usually simple. And what I would definitely say is, do not compare yourself with anybody else. Not even the person who's doing it. Do what you can. As I said, Patanjali says, Thira Sukham Asanam. You should do only that much that your body, that is available to you at that point in time. Over time, it will improve. तो ऐसा नहीं है कि इतना ही होता है तो करना छोड़ दो, नहीं. Hold it wherever you are. Hold the position wherever you are and continue to breathe deep. With every breath, push a little bit more. So, you should do a little more than what your body is just doing without any effort. Yeah. So, thoda effort, a little push than what you're doing. Over time, that will keep increasing as you continue to do your practice. So that is very, very important. Do only that much, which still makes you that makes you feel that you've put in effort, but not that much that is completely causing a physical injury. Itna bhi nahi. Best is you actually do a foundation course somewhere. Even 2-3-4-6 महीना एटलीस्ट आप कहीं जाकर सीख कर आए हो, then it's fine. Your foundation is good. You know what your body can do. You know when you see a video as well that what is it that how much you can do and what is it that you can do. So you can figure that out once you've done some basic course. So that is I would suggest कि या तो सूर्य नमस्कार से शुरू करो क्लास ज्वाइन करने से पहले, या एक क्लास तो कर ही लो, 3 months, 6 months, whatever. But if you have 10 minutes, then nothing like Surya Namaskar. It's a great sequence of 10 asanas and great to start preparing your body for deeper practice.
Great. Perfect. With that, we come to the end of a great and amazing conversation. I think we went into like really deeper aspects of yoga, which I truly enjoyed. Thank you so much, Ami, for joining us for this podcast.
Thank you for having me.
And yeah, with that we come to the end of our show. Please don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe. Until next time, always remember, Dharma rocks. See you around.